Welcome to a fourth session of second course. Today we're gonna talk about motivation behind the acts of worship. We're gonna talk about the type of ibadat, which is the act of worship, understanding of philosophy of creation, stages of zikr, definition of the journey of ishq, principles governing ishq, definition of inverse and non-inverse world. We're going to talk about the explanation regarding God, prayer, ishq, donation, actuality, and truth of existence in the inverse and non-inverse world. And we're going to talk about the spiritual and earthly affairs and how we're going to go about them. Before starting the theoretical materials, as always, let's hear some reports, and if there are any questions, we ought to answer. Anyone would like to share? Or any questions we ought to answer, or any concerns? All right. I know some individuals approach me for some questions. I always endure questions, so I really encourage individuals to ask if there are any at the beginning of the class or at the end. So if you have any questions, I'm sure other people can use them as well. So please open your mic and ask your questions, and we will start the theoretical material. Anyone? All right. Okay. So let's start with the definition of Erfan and Ibadat, which is the act of worship. We're also gonna establish some fundamental definitions because these definitions have some mainstream definition and common understanding of those words. But in Erfan, we define those words very specifically. And by now, we assume that individuals gain some experiences and qualities that had familiarized them with the existence of Halgheh, how the T consciousness network works, how the Halghehs have the potential of the quality transformation. So from the more we go further, the more we delve into the deeper definitions of certain spiritual and religious notion. Particularly these sessions, we have some religious contexts and words that we're going to define and really kind of reshape our understanding of what those words mean and what the common understanding is and how they're different and how we would like to approach it and what are the significance of them. So if you hear some religious words, and I know some people might have some, especially in our culture, which we kind of dealt with a lot of religious tyranny. I know that talking about religious concepts could be very sensitive for people, causing a lot of repulsion. But I invite people to keep an open mind because these definitions are very important to discuss. Also, we would like to be a researcher and kind of approach these deep notions through experience rather than just theoretical. So if you're discussing some notions that it doesn't resonate with you, I would invite you to remain patient and continue moving forward with the experimenting with the halghehs and the experiences that comes with it, and then hopefully have that heartfelt confirmation within yourself rather than a logical judgments based on some previous associations or traumas. So I really invite everyone to approach such notions in this way. So one of the definitions we want to establish today is about ibadat, which is the act of worship, and what does it mean, and what is the optimal approach in the eyes of Erfan. And we also going to talk about uh, Sharia, which is religious laws, and it's not just Sharia is an Arabic word which is, referred to religious laws in Islam, but it doesn't limit there. It's talking about more like a general religious law. What we define here is that we have some surface of the spiritual practice or the laws in which that individuals would kind of encounter as a result of abiding by natural laws. And there are some qualities of those acts. So these nuances are very important to understand. When an individual decides to walk on a spiritual path, what happens is that the journey is toward understanding the natural laws in a more like an objective way, not in a subjective way. And it's important to understand what do I mean by that, because when we perceive something, it becomes automatically subjective. But it this subjective perception could also refer and be linked to an objective existence, which we are basically trying to connect to and understand, uh, which is very important fundamental notion to have an objective truth, because the notion of having an objective truth implies many important factors, which then uh, make sense for a lot of different topics to be considered and discussed. So one of them being like religious laws or natural laws or any laws or any definitions, for example, normality or abnormality. So who defines normality and abnormality? Who defines laws of nature and then the existence? And who defines alignment and misalignment? And these are the notions that previous to Erfan, we only had some theories to discuss, and these theories were really just telling us that what must or what must not be done by individuals following the path. And some people had their own idea. Every path, every religion, every school of thought had their own idea of what is alignment, what is not. Let's say like Jews celebrate in one day. Specifically, the Christians make it in a Sunday. Muslims do it on Friday. So there are some disagreement on which day should be designated for, let's say, prayer. But essentially they're all talking about one God, and they're talking about their core belief is monotheistic belief. So there's no multiple gods, or there's some fundamental agreements with the monotheistic religions, and there are some disagreement with any other schools of thoughts. And here in Irfan, we're trying to really, first of all, remember that Erfan is about examination of the and understanding of the quality world, the ma'rifat that we defined, which is the divine knowledge of the quality world. And that divine knowledge, that ma'rifat, is gained through an experience. And that is only accomplishable by the connections to the T consciousness network and having an experience. Of course, we discuss these notions through words and the tools of the step of logic and discussions, comparison, analysis, and etc. But essentially, what we're relying on in the Erfan Halgheh is the quality experience. And for the first time, these so-called theories on a spiritual realm, it can be confirmed by each individual's experience. And it is important to understand that these experiences are pointing toward the same conclusion. It's not like the uniqueness of the individual's experience doesn't imply the variety of conclusions. The conclusions are the same, only the way in which people experience those confirmations are different and unique. So this basically um, define or kind of present the possibility of the existence of an objective truth, which then there are a lot of implication as a result, which is what are the natural laws, what are the rules of the game essentially. And when someone wants to um, walk that specific path of alignment, then there are some predetermined restrictions that is not um, subjectively defined, but rather is objectively defined. And then the individuals abiding by those laws is not something that they do it because they're forced to, but because they willingly want to participate in that process for the experience that they're gaining or the qualities that they're gaining throughout the process. So just like any game has its own rules, and if someone participated in that game, they're doing it willingly, and then when they do so, they need to abide by those rules, otherwise there would be no game. So the spiritual journey is same. And when it comes to Erfan is also the same. Now, when a person wants to walk on the journey of Kamal and understanding the natural laws, then they encounter the natural laws are basically putting sets of rules of the game that defines abnormality and normality, defines alignment and misalignment, defines unity and multiplicity, defines harmony and antagonism, and etc. And through those different notions and qualities, and individuals are able to exercise their free will and say like whether they want to walk in this path or not. And the fact that the whole journey is a mystery, it allows individuals to um, exercise their free will without being concerned about the consequences immediately. And what happens is that we see that individuals, without the concern of whether they're considered aligned or not aligned, harmonious or not harmonious, they will basically do what they are desiring or what they're enthusiastic toward. And we already studied some of the natural laws, for example, law of reflection, which it reflects and amplifies the individual's enthusiasm toward a notion or concept or an attribute. And then that amplification presents itself in the individual's attributes. And by those, the individuals would show more of those attributes. So we established the understanding that someone be enthusiastic toward being more generous, it becomes more generous every day as they exercise their free will toward generosity. And by law of reflection, that attribute becomes amplified and reiterated and then and manifested and embodied more and more. And vice versa, if someone lies a lot or tricks people a lot or bullies a lot, and then these negative attributes becomes amplified, and the exercise of free will and reiteration of those type of behaviors causes the amplification and solidification and embodiment and presence of those attributes in the long run. So this is one of the natural laws that is basically predetermined the way in which the consequences of certain actions, thoughts, and things like that would be presented. Now, when someone cares about understanding, discovering, and adjusting themselves toward the alignment with natural laws, then they found themselves with being enthusiastic about finding the rules of the game. Now, these rules of the games were suggested by some religions in different ways, like in Judaism and Christianity and Islam. And we explicitly talk about these religions because these are the religions we believe that they're monotheistic, and they have the alignment with the revelations and epiphanies that comes from T consciousness network, and that's why we only consider those type of religions divine religions. We don't know about other ones. There might be some overlap, which it is. I've studied a lot about different schools of thoughts, and in fact, I spent some time practicing them for some part of my journey to discover the truth. But that set aside, the specification of each journey is unique. And it is very important to have an understanding that the rules of the game cannot be contradictory. The principles in which one path is based on cannot be contradictory to one another. And that's why certain uh, religions could be considered in one side and some could not be, because they have some fundamental differences. And it's not just on the details on the surface. For example, the ones that I established, what day to pray, or what to call the God, or what to call the place of worship, but rather it's more fundamental in terms of like whether there's one God or two God, or philosophically there's like fundamental differences. Now, coming back to the definitions we want to establish, religious laws or Sharia, It is very important to understand that the definition of Sharia and Irfan, it has some implication that we want to discuss here. According to Erfan, a person without a religion law becomes aimless. And while the action devoid of Erfan lack quality, the consequences would be negative states. And if a person only cares about the external of the ritual of the worship, these acts becomes more like a dry and lifeless and eventually lead to boredom. And the absence of the spiritual quality in these acts might cause even depression over time. So understanding this natural law, we understand that if we empty the quality behind the acts of worship, then the consequence in which that we expect from religious rituals, which they are meant to be, they're meant to bring joy, spiritual excitement, and deep and divine calm and epiphanies that it puts individuals toward a positive state. We realized that individuals could actually go to negative state as a result because the way in which that they are approaching the act of worship is not in a correct or aligned way. The one of the keys to transcendence lies in preserving both the external and internal aspects of religion, and that is the quality and act of worship and a quantitative aspects of it. So only in this way can the rights of religion be fulfilled, and preventing the incorrect judgments and confusion of those who seek the multifaceted dimension of faith is really important. So, a partial introduction to religion, focusing only on the Sharia and the laws of must or must not, things that should be avoided, must be done, or things like that, leaves people prone to monotony, spiritual fatigue, or even distaste for religions. But what we want to really look at here is the different ways in approaching the worship. And worship needs to also be examined in its quality level. And that's, as you know, is the task of Erfan to look at the quality of everything and assess that. So the chart that you see on a horizontal axis, you see the passage of time, and vertical axis represents the quality of worship. You have the linear worship aligned horizontally, and then we have the ascending worship showing improvement of quality. The higher motivation and the deepening of understanding in worship are linked to marifat, and it is very important to really understand that aspects of it. So, type of worship that it constantly have its quality elevated every day is we call it dynamic worship, and then the static worship is what it kind of like doesn't change the quality, doesn't add much to the individuals, and the individuals do it for various reasons, but they're not doing it for gaining, they don't have a right motivation behind it. So that leads us to the discussions about the range of motivations for worship, and understanding that worship can be done out of obligation, habit, or compulsion. And in such a cases, there's no appropriate motivation behind performing the worship, and thus the motivation uh, doesn't align with the original or harmonious motivation, and the result would not be what the individual seeks or what it should be. So as we know, the motivation could come as a result of fear of God, death, grave, hell, or divine punishment, or wrath of God, or it could come from the desires of, let's say, paradise or its blessings, or some sort of a spiritual reward, or the fulfillment of personal desires. It could be resolution of some problems. It could be good health for oneself or their loved ones, and so on. And the type of motivation really indicates that the worship devoid of that ma'rifat and qualitative aspects of it is aligned with the natural laws or not. And you know that on the contrary, there's some people that their approach to worship is with love and ishq and passion, and they're eagerly seeking the spiritual notions, the truth, that qualitative growth. And uh, those are the individuals that would have their act of worship dynamic and then ever growing with their acts of worship and their practices. So in such categorization, we have uh, different types of, let me see if I have, there we go. It's like the sequence is a little bit off. So we have the worships that are motivated from different sources, and we have the different types of worship based on the different motivations. And you see that the worship of slaves who worship out of fear of God and fear of wrath of God or the hell or things like that. You have the worship of traders who worship out of the desire for worldly or heavenly rewards. And that's basically a type of the traders are the ones that say like, okay, I worship God so that I gain something, and then that entire relationship is based on like a kind of like a business transaction. And then we have the worship of the liberated ones or the free who worship out of gratitude and love for God. And that is a quality that we are aiming, because essentially the quality in which that elevates the individuals through the acts of worship, it leads them to the experience of the positive experiences that it's basically alignment, harmony, hopefulness, ecstasy, receiving revelations, epiphanies, and things like that. So there's a difference between doing something as a result of a love that fills individuals and don't know how to express it. And then there is difference between another type of relationship that is just as a result of fulfilling some sort of duty or an obligation or a force or a fear or things like that. So you see in this chart that we have the act of worship, static individuals that just do it in a quantitative way. There's no quality behind it. They're just doing it to fulfill if they think like they're obligated, if they feel like if they don't do it, if they don't go to the church, the community going to judge them. If they don't go to the mosque, people are going to judge them. If they don't do it, the God's going to judge them, or they're going to be punished, so they're going to go to hell. So they kind of like having this transactional relationship with their act of worship and God. And then we have the act of worship, which is dynamic, based on love, motivation, seeking truth, being filled with the ecstasy that comes with the Erfan related notions and experiences. So the elevation in the act of worship is directly related to have the right motivation, which is the sublime motivation, is the elevation of the understanding and ma'rifat in the act of worship, which is ibadat. So this type of understanding and ma'rifat is relevant to all aspects of ibadat, which is the thought, the speech, and the motions. And it has infinite levels, which means that there are infinite levels of elevations or infinite qualities of achievement that never ending. So no one can say like, okay, I reached it and I'm there. So from the motivation perspective and the spectrum that we discuss, uh, we already established that the types of ways in which people can really relate to the act of motivation. And it is very important to understand the various type of approaches and really examine ourselves. What is our relationship when we reach to God, when we really ask something, when we are seeking something, uh, are we doing that for gaining something, or is it just as a result of the love and that relationship um, that we want to express, that quality that we want to express, and how we relate to God, let's say. There are beautiful poetries in this regard. One of them, they said like the ascetic's life. The ascetics are the people that they kind of give themselves hard time in order to achieve some sort of a spiritual quality or a heavenly reward. So the ascetic's life ended in longing for paradise, but he did not realize that paradise is in forsaking desires. This is one of the poetries. There are other poetries that it says that we from beloved do not seek nothing but the beloved. O ascetic, the Horus and paradise be yours. We desires none of these, only the friend, which basically referring to God. So from this perspective, the Arif, a person that walks the path of Erfan, is well aware of the necessity of developing such relationship that is only based on absolute unconditional love, that the approach which basically translates or presents itself in the acts of worship, and it causes the increase in elevation of that ishq itself as well. So one of the factors that is not understood in the world of Irfan for the people that they are uh, abid, which basically means that they're worshippers, that they use worship, the act of worship, as a means to get to God. If you remember, we talked about various different types of approaches like self-relying, self-oriented, God-relying, self-oriented, self-oriented, God-reliant, and God-reliant and God-oriented. We established those things based on like what the goal of the person is, how they want to achieve that goal, whether they're relying on their own ability, whether they're relying on God, whether they're aiming toward God or aiming toward some sort of a spirit, narcissistic or self-oriented gain. So from that perspective, we need to understand that regardless, God is needless from our worships. But some people might think like they need to keep God happy by worshiping Him, as if He's kind of like holding an infinite, instantaneous expectation of receiving attention or receiving worships, and if you don't, then it gets angry, and then the wrath of God comes in different forms. But this is not really true by the definition that we establish and by the awareness that we gain and or we could gain, and we understand that the act of worship is actually for the individuals themselves, either to elevate the quality of their existence, their understanding, their marifat, that divine knowledge, their ishq, and their inspiration, motivation, enthusiasm, or is a mean to express their ishq toward God, is a mean to be grateful and show their gratitude for all that they received. So the satisfaction of God is actually related to the guidance and the growth of the uh, Adamians, the individuals, the people, the human beings. And it is by the closeness to God is that that desire is going to be fulfilled. And imagine a lover, an in love individual, that in love individuals, all that wants is the beloved, is the closeness of the beloved. If someone is in love, it is impossible to not want someone close. If someone is in love, it is impossible to be happy to see them sad or angry or in fear. And that's why there is a lot of emphasis on the positive state, not having fear if you're with God, not having sadness or sorrow or grief, or also from the other hand that God doesn't really want us to relate to him by fear. Like no one would be in love and want their beloved to love them because they're scared or afraid of something, but rather they just want to be pure love. And that's what it gives it beauty and value. So uh, on the other hand, is that what makes God unhappy or unsatisfied, if that would be even a correct way to say it, because God really doesn't get unsatisfied in a way, but if for the lack of a better word to understand it, is the inability of the beloved, which is a human being, all of us, to be distant from the purpose of creation, for that embodiment of the quality that it gives individuals such a positive state, and then closeness, and that internal integration and harmony. So the act of worship has various different type of effects on the various constituent aspects of our existence, and avoiding or disregarding the laws, it would cause a lot of disturbance, internal disturbances like depression, anxiety, and etc., etc. And it basically doesn't allow the human being to incorporate or utilize the positive impact of the uh, divine and quality aspects of the worship. So all the laws that are in place that would cause uh, some sort of negative impact or have some sort of negative consequences is as a result of the lack of attention of human being to the natural laws. And there are many different natural laws that we're going to learn throughout the course. And if you're curious to learn about them sooner, I really encourage you to read Human Worldview. And in there, we discuss, in there, many of the natural laws briefly discussed, and we will discuss them in the next course as well. So, a lot of these natural laws, the divine laws that are being implemented by the Interuniversal Consciousness Network in existence, it really basically either fulfills or and implements the positive consequences, or basically causing the negative consequences, or implementing that as a result of whether the alignment with the natural law is present or not. That is also encompassing the ibadats and any acts within it as well. So any individuals that would utilizes that positive aspects of ibadat is you also being benefited from the positive rewards that comes with it, and any ones that basically ignorant from the utilizing those aspects of it would also be negatively impacted by it. So it doesn't matter if someone has a very positive intention and do the act of worship. If they do it in this misalignment way, is better than not doing it at all in a sense. And then um, it doesn't matter if someone it's not about the quantitative aspects of it, it's about the quality aspects of it. So that's very important to understand, and that's why a lot of people actually do the act of worship, but they ended up having developing anxiety and depression, because the way in which that they relate and have the qualities present is completely contradictory to the quality aspects of it in an aligned way. So um, from this perspective, the act of worship or ibadat is a way in which someone journeys toward the closeness to God. And the God is defined as the ultimate Kamal. So getting closer to Kamal would be achieved through elevation on a quality level, and it cannot be static. It's definitely dynamic. It could be linear, it could be exponential. And that's the beauty of a world of Erfan, because it's qualitative and not quantitative. It doesn't have to be linear. It doesn't have to be time consuming. It could be in a glimpse, and one person can have experiences or transformation that it took someone for years. So that is just dependent on how enthusiastic, how ready, and how devoted the person is to that path and journey and elevation of the quality of existence. So if the act of worship of today is similar to the act of worship of yesterday, then that is a type of aesthetic act of worship or about that, and they would not really bring any spiritual growth and efflorescence, whereas the dynamic about that is something that every person really feels different and better quality every day. The next topic we're going to talk about starts from very important questions that we address in a world of Erfan, and I would like to really remind some of the questions, and we move toward the laws that I mentioned earlier and we mentioned before, but because of its significance, we would like to talk about it more in this context. And these questions are, where are we coming from? And why are we here? And where are we going after we die? What is the purpose of creation? And what type of goal or purpose should we follow on a general sense? And it is important to really assess and determine and distinguish between the positive and negative awarenesses. And as we established that significance before, I would like to re, re, revisit that and go through those laws again and remind you the significance of, and then also the nuances of. So some of the ways in which we can understand the differences and distinguish between the positive and negative awarenesses is through understanding some basic notions. And there are ways in which we can examine the type of awarenesses. So there are different types of assessments. There's assessments of the individual's state, and we have content assessments, which is principled, and there is analytical. So the examples we kind of looked at for understanding and distinguishing between positive and negative awarenesses was, first of all, running it through these filters, which we discussed before, not being adversarial to justice, confidentiality, Kamal, free will, etc. And then we talked about how anything that comes from positive network, it should bring positive state. And then anything comes from negative network, it should bring negative state. And then also the consequence of that, it would be amplification of such a state. And then we also gave some examples of how they could feel or how they could be, or what type of information they could be about. And some of them, it's basically positive and negative. And the positive one is, for example, the awarenesses that are related to philosophy of creation, the purpose of creation, awarenesses that is basically showing or guiding how to achieve Kamal. Awarenesses that resolves any antagonism and opposition and rebellion against natural laws and help individuals achieve unity. Awarenesses that it uh, guides individuals toward God orientation and God reliant, and understanding of the unity of existence, understanding of purposefulness of our creation and the existence, the understanding of the God's presence, the understanding of the notion that everything is the face of God. Everywhere that you look, you see the face of beloved. And then we looked at the negative awarenesses coming from negative intelligence network, which was the awarenesses that was related to superiority, showing off, or power, or any awarenesses to discover individuals' deficiencies, or reading personalities, or predicting futures, or reading minds, penetrating individuals' inner world, or any awarenesses that would lead individuals toward opposition, antagonism, and disintegration of their thought, or um, going against Kamal, any awarenesses that would increase or nurture the egocentrism or self-reliance or self-orientation or narcissism, or any awareness that would be basically really entertaining, mainly, and it orients individuals to be really kind of only focusing on earthly matters or earthly affairs. And the frameworks in which that positive and negative awarenesses could be examined is really important, because it's something that really individuals need going through the journey of Kamal and the walking in the Erfan path, because not knowing that, it can really cause a lot of cause a lot of delay or confusions for individuals, or sometimes even stopping and really interfere with their Kamal journey. It is important to understand that uh, the significance of the ability to distinguish positive from negative intelligence network awarenesses are really, really fundamental and important. And I really encourage everyone to really establish a very solid understanding and foundation in terms of that ability to determine and discern. We know that one of the most positive and sweet experiences in the world of Erfan is receiving revelations and epiphanies. That fulfillment of that gap and empty space of that is formed as a result of unawareness, being filled with that divine wine of awareness, that transformative revelation, it gives that really ineffable, unexplainable joy that would really fulfill someone that is seeking truth. But it is possible that the lack of attention of the individuals to the type of the divine wine, uh, and just basically drinking of any, receiving awarenesses from the negative instead of positive, and then that leading individuals to be misguided and their Kamal journey be disturbed. In some cases, individual are aware actually of the root cause and the source of the content of their awareness, whether it's divine and whether it's evil, but they actually don't have a very determined and clear framework to discern and distinguish between these awarenesses, and that results individuals to be constantly under the danger of the deviation from the path of Kamal. And from this perspective, detecting, understanding, and establishing such framework has a very great significance. So the positive and negative awarenesses, as I mentioned, could be assessed through various assessments approaches, and we get introduced with these type of approaches. One is the individual states assessments, which is basically assessing the as the name explains, is assessing the type of states that the individual would come into as a result of receiving that revelation or epiphany and awareness. If those states come like sorrow, loneliness, fear, hopelessness, helplessness, anxiety, etc., then this awareness cannot come from the negative, uh, cannot come from positive network. And because positive network only gives positive information and awarenesses that causes like happiness, ecstasy, hope, peace, calm, and etc. So there's one of the ways that we can really assess um, what type of awarenesses the individuals are receiving. And the other one is the assessments that is a principal assessments, which is a type of framework that we kind of established by the filters that we discussed before. determining whether the awareness is positive or negative is based on certain principles of the path of Kamal, which we established. Let's say we established that it should not be adversarial to justice, it should not be adversarial to free will. We know that the personal boundaries of individuals are a divine aspects of our existence, and our secrets are for ourselves, and no one should be able to violate those boundaries or access those information. So any type of information and awareness about other people's deficiencies or inner world or personal life, it's negative from negative network. Any type of awareness that goes against the attribute of God, which is Satar al-Uyubi, which means that hiding the deficiencies would basically go against the natural law. We established the fact that there are other principles like free will, and the importance and significance of free will, and if that is removed from the individuals, then the philosophy of existence would be redundant, and that's why it's one of the most important aspects to be always to be remain preserved, and that is individuals would always have the responsibility for all our for their decisions, and no factor should tell them what to do and what not, because if they just go with that, then it means that they didn't use their free will, they didn't use their own knowledge and awareness to make a decision, and the lack of that um, aware decision, it takes the responsibility off of them. And if they make a good decision, then it has no value because someone basically gave them the information and they cheated it. And if they make a mistake, then they can just say like the information was misguiding and they were deceived. So there would be no responsibility and value for in either way, whether it's a correct decision or not correct decision. So free will is very, very important. And another aspects that it's important for us to discern between the positive and negative and awarenesses from the networks is that we know that one of the main goals um, of positive consciousness network and in general the journey of Kamal is the collective salvation. And there is no incidence or no possibility that a positive network would want someone hinder an awareness from other people. So such a suggestion would only come from negative network. If information comes and then there's another information comes that don't share that with other people, that means that it's coming from negative network, because positive network never would suggest that not to share the positive network, the positive awarenesses, because at the end of the day, we don't want superiority. We want enlightenment. We want awarenesses toward Kamal on a collective way, and we know that the salvation is only a collective matter and not an individual matter. But one of the most important aspects of positive awareness is that it should guide human beings toward Kamal. And for this reason, it would never suggest something about earthly affairs. It doesn't really care what we buy or what we don't, or who we have relationship or not, or whether we should divorce or not, or whether we should buy something or not, or what book should we read, or what profession should we choose or not. And all those is very, very personal decisions that we need to make ourselves. And positive network never directly tell us what to do. And that goes against then the free will. And also, if it's related to the earthly affairs, it's completely outside of the positive networks jurisdictions, because it never gets involved with those things. And we have the analytical assessment, which basically it is a type of assessments that it utilizes the tools of logic, and the logic kind of processes and do the assessments and analysis based on information that is programmed before, and then it gives a conclusion. So first, there are inputs of information going through this process. It passes through Fetrat, Nahad. These are softwares, our existential softwares. We will talk about them in Cosmontology course later. But there are some softwares, if you remember, we kind of like briefly discussed them when we were talking about the mental body and how the reactions kind of form in the life, going through the life in such a way that we talked about the worldview filter, and then there was subconscious, and there was all the other filters, and we discussed that they're in the subconscious level. There are some softwares that are operating, and some of them we just named. So all these information is going through this process, and then the awarenesses and epiphanies and revelations also not exception. So goes through as an input of information, and in one type of very simple analysis happens on a revelations and epiphanies, that it could basically be some sort of like a philosophical assessments. And for this reason, we could say that is based on a step of logic, and we could say that the step of logic really relies on the step of ishq, because if there's no input of information in forms of revelations and epiphanies, then logic doesn't have anything to really process. So another important point is that we should know that logic um, is not really sufficient to be only factor to distinguish between the positive and negative revelations and epiphanies, because there's three different um, properties of logic or aql that makes it really not reliable. And I'm not saying this to really disregard the value of aql. It's absolutely important, essential, and a very big role. But I just want to say that it is very, it could be very faulty. So we need to really be careful with that. The reason is that there are a few reasons. One reason is that it could make mistakes. The variety of information and input that comes to logic, it's enormous. So and then we are programmed before. So all these inputs of information, which is as a result of our five senses, our experiences, the programmings as a result of sociocultural circumstances, revelations, epiphanies, delusions, imaginations, our fitrat or fundamental softwares, or nahad instinctual softwares, etc. All those are enormous amount of information coming. So there's always possibility of errors. So despite of the fact that our physical senses are faulty and it could make mistakes, the judgments based on logic also could, based on the faulty senses already, is too faulty and potential error in two levels. So we could end up making the wrong judgments. So there are two deficiencies or two lackings or two aspects that we should really be aware of, that renders logics not really a very reliable source of discernment for the awarenesses of positive and negative. So we always should use other methods, incorporate them to the process as well, to avoid making the wrong conclusions or jumping to the fast conclusions right away. So one other aspects is that a human being can develop faulty beliefs, and that is as a result of the uh, incorrect conclusions by logic, which is not reliable. And also there are other type of information which could be as a result of delusions. And this is very important because this gets to why people like taking psychedelics is not a great idea, because here the type of experience, and again, like I've had those experiences. I lived that life for good enough years in my life to talk about it. Um, the amount of the extent of realness of those experiences, uh, and how powerful it is to convince logic. And a lot of the programming is in our subconscious, in our logic filters. It's so much that if faulty information pass through, it can have enormous amount of impact on the individual's worldview, health, etc., etc. So one of the reasons we can't really rely on substances or logic for some sort of a spiritual conclusions or discernment of a information being positive or negative, coming from positive network or negative network, is the faultiness of these sources. One of the poetries of Maulana, other known as Rumi, is that the partial aql or logic has a parasite, which is delusion and doubt. And it's like it's darkness, and the darkness, it's the homeland. So just like how convincing is to consider a dark space a homeland as a result of a delusion and a doubt, which are the parasites of a logic, essentially, Maulana says. And other aspects of logic that makes it really faulty is partiality, or being detail oriented in ways. And we established the fact that the logic of human being is very detail oriented. And until would the logic would not get connected to the logic of the whole through ishq, which is a bridge, then it cannot really analyze and assess the massive information and to be a reliable source. So it is, fair that would not be able to assess the information correctly. And it's also normal that whatever that is not achieved by themselves or by the logic itself would be denied. And for this reason, we cannot really have an expectation to rely on that alone. So we can't really rely on logic alone for the discernment of whether the information comes from or awareness comes from positive or negative network. Another beautiful poetry by Maulana is that the detail-oriented logic is not an logic that extracts. It allows the skills, and it needs the details. This logic is not programmable or does not capable of understanding the revelations and epiphanies for the ones that receive it. So it's really hard to actually translate it as I'm going and thinking about the poetry and try to translate it. But the essence of it is that really acknowledges beautifully. Of course, it just doesn't really rhyme or anything, but it just beautifully rhymes in Farsi. But there is basically saying like logic is very detail oriented. It extracts everything. It's about skills. It's about that logic, aspects. But when it comes to the revelations and epiphanies, you can't train it to understand it. So it's completely incompatible with that. So that's why it becomes an obstacle even many times. And another one is actuality of the actuality viewing in a way. And the actuality is whatever that occurred. And we established that the truth of everything is howness and whyness of that occurrence. And the logic of human being is have specific properties and abilities when it comes to the detection. But in order for achievement with this truth, and kind of getting close to processing the information from the world of quality, it is not very capable. So information that we give, it's very hard for it to really go through it, especially what I'm talking about, the information that contains truth and the quality world. It is very hard to for a logic to really discern and then process these information and then discern if it's positive or negative. So uh, considering that logic has two way of detecting the positive or negative, uh, whether the information is positive or negative, and we really established how it can be. One is that it kind of like can really see the alignment and synchronicity between the awarenesses with one another and see if they're really aligned with each other. And also, it's kind of like seeing if there is an antagonism and contradiction between them. And the second way in which the logic can really help us to discern is to really um, see if these awarenesses and epiphanies are aligned with the divine books. And what I mean by divine books, we already established what we mean. Like we talk about Bible and Quran specifically. And one of the ways in which logic can really help us to discern whether the awarenesses and epiphanies that we received is a line and coming from positive network or not is by seeing if it really matches with the divine books or not. And any type of antagonism and misalignment would basically renders it faulty or in a way that there is a um, potential possibility of that being faulty. Now, the alignment of the awarenesses with parts of the um, divine books really can indicate the alignment or misalignment of the information. But it is important to note that some of these information in this religious texts or spiritual texts that are considered monotheistic, like divine as we defined, it requires kind of decoding, and it's not quite evident right out the bat, and that's why a lot of them got misinterpreted and then implemented in a wrong way, cause a lot of deviations and unfortunate operations. So it is very important that to really discern this type of information from one another. So it is for this reason that we don't have other resources other than doing this, the state analysis or state assessments or the principal assessments and also other type of assessments all together as a package to see if this information and awareness we received is positive or not, and whether those would go against some of the previous aligned notions and epiphanies. Despite of this factors we discussed, it is very necessary to understand that the positiveness of the awarenesses is also related to the heartfelt confirmation. The hujjat qalbi is one of the factors that is very, very important for us to really discern the truth. One of the important and interesting notes that Dr. Taheri talks about is that the truth sits in your heart in a way that you feel like you already knew it, even though that you didn't. So one of the way in which the truth could be discerned is that it just sets in your heart as you knew it before, even though that it wasn't there or it didn't click in, and then suddenly clicks, and then you know by your heart that is true. So again, we need all these tools together as a package. We don't want to rely on one because it's faulty. It could be faulty. So for example, principles are principles. They can't be faulty. If you run it good through those filters, then we are more assured that the way in which that we are filtering the information, it is um, correct and aligned. But other aspects of it, we need to combine it with different aspects for us to get um, the best result. So, coming back to our discussion, the next discussion we're going to have is the various levels of zikr. And zikr is also similar to mantra, but is not, because mantra, it belongs to that type of school of thought. Zikr is different. But even if you want to consider the similarities, there are various stages in terms of quality when it comes to uh, zikr. And there are verbal zikr, which is the first primary stage of zikr, which is based on a step of logic. And when this level elevates, it turns to a mental zikr. And in this state, individual has a presence in their mind. So their mind is present. But the mind of the human being only would call something that is not present. So the calling, it implies absence. And that indicates that this level is not still in its higher quality. So the higher quality of that, it becomes heartfelt zikr. In the mental zikr, the level of heartfelt understanding and the presence of God still doesn't exist. And the person's still calling God in the step of logic. So the feeling of closeness and familiarity and intimacy is not there yet. But in the higher level, where the mental zikr transforms and elevates to a zikr based on a step of ishq, that in itself has various different degrees. Um, this zikr, first stage is heartfelt. Um, zikr, and which is basically on this level of ishq and becomes ineffable. We can't really explain it or define it, but it's not something that is constant. It kind of fluctuates. It gets stimulated, and then it goes, fades away. But the individuals like feels this like passionate, heartfelt experiences as a result. Now, there's higher level of zikr, even above that, where the individual understands the presence of God, and in that level, he finds himself immersed by the vastness of God, and he's filled with this unconditional love, that ishq, that is ineffable, it's unexplainable. So the understanding of presence of God is that existential zikr, that is highest level of zikr. And when human being get to that understanding, they actually get to the true definition and understanding of the notion of monotheism. So, or Tawheed. So that unification, that ultimate unity, uh, that oneness. So that existential zikr is something that it becomes integrated and embodied in the individual's existence and aligns the existential core access toward positive. And this level of existential zikr is kind of doing this configuration and adjustments of the existential core access toward Kamal, and that itself would have external manifestation. So, in truth, the existential access of each individual would affect the any type of um, any type of um, effect of the body, of effect of existence of the individuals on different levels in their language, in their eye gaze, in their ears, and existentially. So all their parts of their body that for someone that is aligned and their existential axis is aligned with camel orientation becomes zakir, or one each individual does the zikr it's almost like every cells of that existential body, it's in prayer and worship. So that's the highest level that one can achieve. And so not only this uh, individual's quality of perception shifts from apparent viewing to inner viewing through the divine knowledge and ma'rifat ilahi, and also see the beloved in every manifestation. uh, their ears also sharpens to the symphony of existence, hear the music that are Kamal giving, that cannot be heard through the physical ear, and the emission of their behavior, their eyes, eye gaze, their expressions, their movements, all would leave a positive impact on an existential level behind. And from this, they become constant in constant connection. And there is this notion of da'imul ittisal, which means constantly connected. And in that state, uh, the transformation that is deep internally and externally would impact individual life, not only themselves on an individual level, but also people that are around them and on existence. The next topic we're going to talk about is the outlook of Erfan toward God, Ishq, and religious actions and activities. The journey that human beings are going toward God in life, it is the journey of Ishq. And in all the length of this journey, we are kind of involved with Ishq one way or the other. From the beginning of the creation, Adam was created, and then God, for such a creation, congratulated himself, and angels prostrated before him, and it became evident that all the existence is created for Adam. And from this level, Adam became uh, fell in love with himself and basically started experiencing the love in its lowest level, which is narcissism, the love toward the self. Now, this narcissism is a part that exists in our instinctual software from the beginning. And for this reason, this specific property, instinctual property, is present in every individual when they are born. And we can see that even their love toward their mother and surrounding is as a result of this narcissistic love. And it basically implies the personal needs that it's the focus, and the fulfillment of them is the focus. So based on this plan that is a design of the human being to go toward Kamal, this ability exists so that we could have an experience throughout the earthly life and other lives that would basically get out of the ishq toward the self, the love toward the self, and be transcended toward the love to all the other manifestations and aspects of existence, so that it can be completely filled with the ishq of God. One of the signs of sublimity, it is that the person got free from narcissism and salvated toward the love of outside of themselves and eventually God. And from another point, comprehension and understanding of human being from Kamal is dependent on this ishq. And for this reason, a lot of um, arifs also emphasized in their poetry regarding this notion that invite everyone to fall in love and experience gain the experiences necessary for the Kamal journey. Hafiz says, the lover of ecstasy never sees an end to the world's work. One who doesn't see the grand design won't grasp life's purpose. So, one of the important principle when it comes to love is that someone that is a narcissist cannot experience the love toward beloved or a divine love. And for that, they need to empty their heart from the love of the self so that the love of beloved could reside. The Arif in another beautiful poetry says, "Go clean out the house of your heart. Then he will enter it, and his beauty will reflect in you." So, in general, when we talk about the divine love, you need to pay attention to two principles. That one is that one heart is only a place of one ishq, and the fact that humans cannot, in and of itself, uh, experience or fall in love with God. The first principle is noting the fact that the existence of narcissism cannot and would not allow the experience of another love or love toward else. And the second principle is based on the fact that no one has the ability to understand and recognize the essence of God. And without having marifat, the divine knowledge, we cannot really fall in love with a thing or a person or another person. So for this reason, a love toward him without going through the different stages that we explained and without his mercy would and the bounty would not be possible. So the even imagination and visualizations of the human's mind toward God is not really representative of the divine intrinsic qualities of actuality and truth of that. There are poetries of Maulana that also emphasizes on this notion that it says that whatever that you think, it's it dies, and whatever that you can't think, that's God. So this notion that whatever that we think of is something that would not be God, it basically limits the actuality or truth of the that aspect and limit it to our understanding. But when we, if we want to really understand what is God, that intrinsic aspects of that is ineffable, and that means that we can't think of it. So everything that we think becomes mortal, and anything that we can't think, that becomes God. The love toward God is acquired through an attraction that is based on love toward creation of God. So any arif that talks about the love of God, it got to an understanding that God is actually the lover and in love toward their creation, and we are the beloved. And they understand relatively that the joy of being beloved, how that experience is, and then to the certain extent, they are aware of that relationship of the love and beloved, God being in love and be the beloved, and understand that um, relationship, it kind of changes the whole dynamic that we fall in love for God. And we just understand that actually is the opposite, because we can't really fall in love with God because we don't have any comprehension of it. We can only relate to that by falling in love with the manifestation of God, and it is the God that is in love with us. Another poetry, it says that who can perceive you as you truly are? Each sees you through the limits of their own knowledge. So there are limitations in our level of understanding um, what love is and how to relate to it. Also, Hafez says, understanding you is not within every man's reach. And your halgheh, and this is one of the reference to halgheh, says like, oh, your ring is not, um, doesn't belong in any ear. So it is just kind of like a represent and a metaphor of a ring in an ear is like an earring. Uh, and halgheh is basically, uh, sometimes Dr. Taheri uh, uses shows this poetries and saying like we're really not sure if they were aware of the existence of the halgheh or whether they were just talking metaphorically. When we were talking about halgheh, meaning that like Erfan, like the aspects of the quality aspects of connecting the T consciousness network, not halgheh that I'm talking about. Or whether they're just like metaphors that they're not specifically aware of such an existence. So when it comes to our level, we are only able to get to the level of recognition and understanding of the manifestations of God, and to that level to get closer to God. So that implies that we can only fall in love with its manifestations and the presentations or representations of God, and not Himself. So for the very primary stages of the Eshk based journey of transformation, human can only fall in love with the manifestation initially, basically coming out of the love toward themselves and fall in love toward the divine manifestations or all other manifestations. So in all these stages, the experiencing of ishq, um, we need to really remember that the heart of human being can only contain one ishq at the time. And first, that ishq toward the self needs to be replaced by a fluctuation between love toward the self and love toward the others, and then eventually transform to the third stage, which is completely, the ishq is completely oriented toward outside of the self and other than the self. And with this, he or she becomes, her heart or his heart becomes empty of the love itself, and then becomes ready for the fourth stage, which is achieving the understanding of divine ishq. God is in love with all the manifestations, but even relative understanding of such a ishq uh, can't exist for us. And just when the individual fall in love with the manifestations of God, it would get to an understanding that the love of God exists, and with the understanding of being the beloved of God, would experience the love of God. Only through this procedure and through this steps is possible to have such experience. So the human being's experience shows that the love toward the manifestations of love toward the divine manifestations of God, it can be from different levels of fall in love with nature or a part of that, to be elevating to the higher level of falling in love with another human being, sublime human being, for example, the love of Rumi to Shams. And in all these factors, it is the love toward someone else that is the source of liberation of the narcissism, and consequently the manifestations of divine love, the God's love. Another RF says, Shah Ni'matullah Vali says, I I loved and became the beloved. I was like that and I became such. This is basically going regarding the notion that someone falls in love, it gets empty from that love toward the self, and then understand that actually he is the beloved, loved by God, and then it transforms from one state to the other. So, in another word, the earthly love is or should be a factor that by that we can empty ourselves from narcissism. So then the possibility of the divine uh, ishq of God to be reflected. But it could be questions that why a lot of individuals or human beings are experiencing the earthly love in such that doesn't lead to the ishq toward God, and there's only very few that they would experience such a divine experience. And the answer is that the earthly love could be logic based, aql based. So we have two notions in Erfan introduced by Dr. Taheri, ishq aqlani and ishq ishqani, which basically means that a logic-based ishq or love, or ishq-based ishq, or um, love-based love. So the distinguishing of those two are the basis for the answer of why earthly love sometimes doesn't transcend to divine love. When an ishq is based on ishq, human being would achieve divine ishq. And if that is toward narcissism, then that doesn't lead it. So the ishq based on ishq, it doesn't really seek any benefit. It's not self-benefiting. It's not um, aiming to gain something out of it. And it is only for the ishq itself that it's pursued. And also the beloved or the loved one would not be captivated or imprisoned as a lot of earthly love causes. So, in another word, in the narcissism stage, which exists in earthly love, because it's a love based on logic and it's based on benefit, so it's kind of like a transactional exchange. I love you because of, you have money, or you're handsome, or you're educated, or you have a good family, or you uh, you know you can provide for me, or this and that. All the earthly ishqs are logical and uh, oriented towards some sort of benefit, and that is rooted in narcissism in a way. But and that's why it doesn't really lead to a transcendent ishq. But it is not only ishq that it basically exist in the two states of narcissistic and non-narcissistic. In order for us to examine a lot of individuals' worldview, we can really um, assess the world of a narcissistic individuals as a inverse world, and a non-inverse world would be for non-narcissistic individual. So in the non-inverse world, which is a world that it allows the understanding of divine ishq and the world of Erfan, there's always a sublime viewing type of approach. We see everything and kind of look at it in a levels of sublimity, or whether it serves it or not. And for this reason, the Erfanic view toward God, religion, prayer, donation, or Nazr, which is like a religious concept I'll describe, it has very different definitions and the different ways in which one would approach to it. And besides the notions like ishq, the actuality and truth of existence, and surrender and effort, endeavor, uh, it gets to an attention that without an Erfanic view, the consequence would be an inverse world, which will define it what that means. So I noticed that we passed time and then there are a lot of discussions to be had. I don't want to rush it and it's late. So I'm going to pause the theoretical material to this point, and you can take a note in case I missed a note. You can remind me that we will be discussing the inverse and non-inverse world next session, continuing covering and completing the discussions of second course, fourth session of second course. So with that, I'm just going to allow individuals, if there are any questions or discussions you want to have for the next 5 minutes. If not, then we're just going to do an etisol, and I wish you a great night and see you next week.